Hello, everybody, and welcome to this random impromptu tasting. I've been trying to figure out what to do with my live tastings, and I figured there's no better way to figure it out than to just do it. So, can you see me okay? Can you hear me all right? It looks like everything is working on my end. As you know, last time we had some technical difficulties. So, always trying to work the kinks out. Now, before I get into the tasting, I have some things that I want to uh, address. One, in the last month, Bourbon has helped almost raise nearly $1 million last week at the at a Navy SEAL event for the C4 Foundation. We raised $200,000 for those American heroes. That's awesome. The week before that, at a USO function in Washington, D.C., we raised $400,000 to help the USO. And next week, or in a couple weeks, November 9th, in partnership with the Bourbon Crusaders, I am curating and helping an event to help end hunger in Louisville. So if you want to learn more about that, go check out the Bourbon Crusaders website. Now, we've also got a new issue of Bourbon Plus out, and if you haven't checked it out, this is probably my favorite issue because of one man, and that is Jimmy Russell. Jimmy Russell's this iconic distiller at Wild Turkey. To me, he is the most important bourbon person we have. I love Jimmy. He's a great human being. So go check out Bourbon Plus when you get a second. Whole Foods, Kroger, Liquor Barn. You can find them all over the place. So let's get to the tasting. First, I want to start with a brand that everybody knows. It is Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels is choosing to not call itself a bourbon, although they could technically if they wanted to. But Tennessee whiskey is a style of American whiskey that goes through a charcoal mellowing process before it goes into the barrel. And if you ask me, I think it's probably really difficult to make Jack Daniels from the simple fact of it's an extra step and they are so massive. It's hard to keep that quality there. Now, in the past few years, Jack Daniels been trying to make an attempt at becoming more premium. What's interesting about this is initially whiskey geeks were kind of rejecting it. Then we started tasting their barrel strength rye. And last year they came out with a heritage barrel, which was going into the barrel at a much, much lower proof. It was my number 4 whiskey of the year last year, and it returns fewer than 200 barrels aged in this style. And it was going into the barrel, I believe, at 103 proof. Well, actually, I don't know what the rate was it was going in the barrel, but I do know that it is low. This is bottled at 100 proof, Jack Daniels single barrel, a heritage barrel. This is going to be my first tasting. So get in there and see that color. That color is pretty nice. So this will be a year older than the one that was released last year. It's got that patented kind of banana smell that Jack Daniels has, but it's not like a banana, like in the form of an actual banana. It's more of that juicy fruit banana kind of gum smell. So the nose initially is not really that attractive to me. I really don't like that juicy fruity smell. I think it always smells kind of chemically to me. So after we have that that banana kind of the banana bubble gum. There's some oak, vanilla, and like a pie, like some kind of like fruit pie, maybe a blueberry. It's just kind of a general fruit pie coming out of the oven. Very nice. It hits the palate in a very spicy way. This is a very dry mouthfeel. Like it like pulled out all the moisture out of my palate. So very, very unique. That doesn't happen very often with me. But that definitely is got some heat to it for 100 proof. I feel like this is not a very balanced whiskey. It's coming very hot. One more taste. If you notice, I am spitting just because when you taste as much as I do, you drink it all the time. You'd end up on the floor a lot, and I'll get in trouble if I drink all of it. So yeah, this comes in really hot. There's some spice in there. It's some cinnamon, some pepper, and then it kind of bottoms out. There's a little bit of sweetness there, but that heat really is not a spice form for me. It's coming in as kind of like alcohol. So right now, on my first tasting of the Jack Daniel's Heritage Barrel, it's not something that I would be, recommending for you to go buy at 64.99. With that said, that's just my palate. You should taste for yourself to see if you like it. Okay, moving on. I'm going to switch it up here a little bit, and we are going to taste some apple brandy coming to you from the Spirits of French Lick. Now, this is distilled by a gentleman named Alan Bishop. He's someone that got plucked from a Kentucky distiller. Actually, he's got a little moonshining in his blood. Really good guy, and he hit me up and said he was really proud of this. So I respect his palate a lot, and I can't wait to see what this tastes like. So, apple brandy to me, the greatest apple brandy area in the country is in France called Calvados. If you get a chance to find a bottle of Calvados, they're just amazing. And if I had my druthers, I would love to see more Calvados in stores, but unfortunately, it's not a very popular spirit in the United States, except those of us who like um, those barrel aged products. Okay, so this is definitely a brandy, obviously, but it's got kind of like a apple core, some apple juice smells. I mean, it really does. It smells like an apple. I mean, it does. I mean, it should. It shouldn't be a surprise to me that it smells like an apple because it's apple brandy. Mm. It's very pleasant on the nose. So this is unique. This has got like a kind of like really like an apple pie, and then on the back end some like anise. So there's like a little bit of bitterness there. I will say that having tasted a lot of apple brandies, this one would do well with a little bit more time in the barrel. But I think that's going to be the distiller's intent anyway. It's only 2 years old, so you're probably looking at like this is the first release of many to come, and it's in great shape. So I can't wait to see what this is going to taste like in the future. But for now, if you grab yourself a bottle of Old Clifty, I'd recommend making this in a sidecar, but this is definitely a brandy to keep your eye on. Um, Quite tasty. Actually, I like it a lot more on the second taste. You may even just want to sip it, but this is recommended. Spirits of French Lake, Old Clifty, Hoosier, apple brandy. So now let's go to Boothill Distillery, distilled and bottled by Boothill Distillery in Dodge City, Kansas. The these guys look like they're a grain to bottle facility, and this is a limited release. good looking little label. And there's no age statement here, but it does say it's not chill filtered. I'm trying to find an age. The mash bill is 51% corn, 49% wheat. There are only 476 bottles of this made, and I do not see an age. So when you don't see an age on a bottle of bourbon, then that means it says it's over 1 year old. Well, I hate it when they do that. Over 1 year old can mean it's 150 years old, for God's sake. Just give us an age. This is not. Um, I would say this is probably not in compliance with the federal label laws, but the federal government did approve this label. Uh, yeah, I don't like those kinds of labels. So you see there it says over 1 year old. If you're going to, if you're a distiller and you're trying and you have young whiskey to put in the bottle, just say it. Just say what the age is. No one cares. But be honest. At least this is a hint of like what range we could be looking at. So let's give Boot Hill a shot. Let's drive out of our head that we don't like the age statement. Ugh. Well, it's not this is going to sound weird, but it's not reflective of being young. It's just reflective of it's got some like you ever been into a closet that's just kind of mildewy and or a basement that's mildewy and kind of been collecting dust and stink. This is what this reminds me of. It reminds me of a dirty closet. Yeah. And oak. A dirty closet and oak. Ugh. It's not it's not the worst thing I've tasted. It's definitely on. This reminds me of like this reminds me of some wheat whiskeys I've tasted. It's got like some bubblegummy notes. Um, it's got like some grain stuff, some oak. There's nothing in that note and in the taste that is offensive. The nose, when I say it smells like a dirty closet. That's really not intended to be offensive. That's really just kind of what it smells like. And that is, you could say that some people would classify that as funk. Well, that funk for me smells like a dirty closet. On the palate, it's just, it's weird. It's like bubblegum meets oak. And then there's like a weird, like salty beef jerky, toward the back. But I don't know what the age range on this. It says it's over 1 year old, and I would like to find out if there's any older barrels in here because it almost feels like to me that there's could be like a composite of more than. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know how many barrels are in this. There's 476 bottles. So the assumption there is that there would be more than one barrel, but not by much, and it depends on what kind of barrels that they're aging in. But it's not. There's not really any kind of bad flaws, if you will. So, like you've heard me talk about turpentine or drywall, that stuff's not in here. So, I mean, they're making a valiant effort to go with a very high wheat, but I think that's put them at risk. I taste like that just over bubblegummy note that I get in a lot of wheat whiskey. So I'm not saying don't. I'm not for now. I'm saying like I don't recommend this, but at the same time, I'm a big believer in supporting small businesses and craft distillers. So I I recommend you go buy a bottle, try it for yourself, and put your notes in the comment section of like what you get in this because it's unique. It's unique. And if you like bubble gum, you'll like it. Okay. So let's go to the probably the bourbon of the hour and the limited edition Four Roses small batch. And I feel like I've already tasted it this year, but I saw this bottle over here and it was screaming to be tasted again. So here we go. And this is a composite of 11-year-old OESV, 15-year-old OESV, 15-year-old OESK, and 21-year-old OBSV. Now that is quite the hell of a range right there. Man, I gotta tell you, sometimes when you're doing a flight, a whiskey can just smell and taste so much better because of the other whiskeys it's up against. Um, I'm really disappointed with the Jack Barrel that I had because I had high expectations for it. But after coming off of that last whiskey, which is not fair, but I mean, this is what bourbon's supposed to smell like, just layered in vanilla, caramel, cinnamon. I mean, you're walking right into a confectionery with this. This is absolutely gorgeous. Cigar box. When you get a fresh box of cigars and you first crack it open and that whiff of cigars just creep right on up into your nose. My God. And then dust. So like the dust of a floor, so you have all these really incredible notes and then you have like this funky earth note that I can best describe as dust. So shall we taste? Hmm. Notice I'm not spitting that one. I want to describe this to you, but it's still it's still on my palate. It's still finishing. What this bourbon has done, this Four Roses limited edition small batch, it like walked across my palate and I can taste it. Every single inch of my tongue is like working with the bourbon. I can feel it. It's coating my entire palate. It's even landing up on the roof of my palate and just kind of waxing, coating it. It's just absolutely gorgeous. The notes here are some baking spices, some caramels. Oddly, too, and I don't get this in Four Roses. It has like a really sweet cornbread. I don't get that in Four Roses very often. So that's very unique. And there's all of this like confectionery goodness in this. When I do have to say that I'm just gonna go ahead and say I'm gonna go ahead and put this in my list for um American whiskey of the year. So this is going to go. I'm going to go ahead and officially put this into my uh, blind tasting that I will do for American whiskey of the year, and that will be. I will be announcing when I will be doing that. But Four Roses limited edition small batch has just entered that. Last year, I think I tasted 15 and Barrel Craft Spirits 15-year-old. The gray label was the winner. And I just did a blind tasting where I pitted the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection up against some regular everyday bourbons, and Rare Breed from Wild Turkey won that for me. Now I I was blown away, and to be honest with you, those blind tastings you just don't know. And although you taste for a living, you still get surprised. So that was a good time. So I think that this I cannot recommend this enough. This is fantastic. Four Roses, limited edition, small batch. Now I've got a little time here. If I can go to the questions here. Looks like Adam Terry has a question for me. Adam asks, "You mean 1792 Foolproof isn't your whiskey of the year?" I have not done my whiskey of the year yet. That was Jim Murray's, I believe, had put that in his list. So that was not mine. Let's see here. A lot of comments on when I was tasting the Boothill bourbon. Ouch, that's a bad sign. That's a ringing endorsement. I sometimes you it's a it's a double-edged sword. I meet these distillers, and I really do. I've rarely met someone who's a distiller that I didn't like. But the fact is, if I have to be objective, I have to like taste these things, and I can't let personal bias get in the way of what I think about a whiskey. And like with the Jack Daniel's single barrel of the Heritage Barrel, that was amazing last year. This year, I don't think it even holds a candle to last year. So yeah, every year is different. All right, let's see what else we have. Oh, Dewey Kaufman saying hello from Tornado Central. I grew up in Oklahoma, so my heart goes out to everybody in Dallas. We were just passing through in Dallas, my family and I, on Saturday. So really do hope everyone's okay. I was from Dallas out there. All right. Well, if there's not any more questions, I am going to sign off. Oh, here we go. What did you think of the rare breed raising their proof a few years back? Now that's interesting, Dewey, with that question. Dewey Kaufman, thank you for that. That's interesting about the raising of the proof. Seems like it may have helped rare breed. I was really against it at the time because I'm just one of these staunch believers in lower barrel entry proof is always better. Now, sometimes, it's not true. Like let's take a look at something like the Heaven Hill series. They're going in at 125 proof, and I dare say that the Heaven Hill stuff does quite well in competition, and it's some of my favorite liquid. So, I mean, that kind of like nixes the argument that the better whiskey is going in at a lower barrel entry proof. But I do believe in lower barrel entry proof for older whiskeys. But what I found is that the flavor with the new rare breed is more complex and has a lot more intensity to it than when it was a lower proof. Have you tasted the new Knob Creek small batch 12-year-old? This is going to sound bad, but not that I know of. I don't think I've tasted that. Soon. I will taste it soon. Do you ever talk about your personal thoughts on the Van Winkles, saying they were a big part of shutting down the secondary market? That comes from Bourbon Junkies. And actually, Bourbon Junkies, that was on my panel at Bourbon and Beyond, where that information came out. So Preston Van Winkle volunteered it, and then it later appeared on the podcast I'm a part of, Bourbon Pursuit. So my personal thoughts on that is it's difficult, but when you own a brand, you own the trademark, um, you tend to be very protective of that. And I will tell you that the Van Winkles are in a very, very difficult, precarious situation, and that they're trying to protect their brand, and they're also trying to, um, cut off like the illegal selling of it. Now, I personally think that the secondary market could have been like a marketing vehicle, more of a marketing vehicle for these brands. And truth be told, um, I think that the people who see the secondary market as an enemy will come to find out that it was actually an ally. There was just a few bad apples, in those areas that were trying to, cheat a very well organized system and got caught. So I think that's going to come back and bite a lot of people. I have talked to Preston Van Winkle, and the one thing that he comes up with a lot are the fake alcohol related deaths in the Dominican Republic and other places. They were pretty scared that their stuff could be faked and somebody would get poisoned and sold on the secondary market. So that was one of their rationales behind it. I'm not saying they were wrong or right. That was their opinion. And I do think that in 5 years, we could see a shift in what people gravitate toward. And the secondary market influenced a lot of what people went after, and I think that might be changing in the next 5 years. Thoughts on the new makers? That's the RC6 barrel, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I really dig it. I tasted it at Bourbon and Beyond for the first time, and then again. And if you follow my work, you know that this is a sign of something that I like in my household is that my wife is now making whiskey sours with the new maker's mark. So that's one way to put it. Smaller bourbon producer, you'd say to keep your eye on. I don't think there's any secrets out there about what small bourbon producers to keep your eye on. In Kentucky, obviously Peerless, Wilderness Trail, and Be Rollin'. But in the Cleveland area, there is a brand called Tom's Foolery, and he's making pot still whiskey and brandy. He's an excellent distiller. We've actually got a feature. He's in a pot still feature for the next issue of Bourbon Plus. I'm a big fan of what he's doing, and I'd say there's a distiller in Colorado called 291. He's doing a lot of fun stuff, and he's finishing in like aspen staves. And when I first tasted his whiskey, I was like, "Man, you got a long way to go." And then I retasted it some months ago, and I've just fell in love with it. Like I tasted a blind at San Francisco World Spirits Competition, and I learned like I was like, wow, this stuff is really good. So he's 291 is like the most improved distiller that I think I have ever seen to go from like down bottom to really really well respected and high up there. So 291 is one to keep your eye on. Any particular stores or restaurants that do barrel picks that you always enjoy or recommend? Without a doubt, my boy Chris from Kroger, in the Kroger shops in Louisville, Kentucky, and Chris at Westport Whiskey and Wine, and Brad at Liquor Barn. Those are three fantastic pallets, and they do a great job picking stuff outside of Kentucky. There's an Indiana liquor store chain called I think it's called Big Red Liquors. I want to say maybe Big Red One, but it was an army unit in Germany. But I think it's Big Red Liquors. He does a phenomenal job. He actually has some of his own. He has stuff in his office aging, so he's a big time geek, and I really do think he does a good job picking barrels. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Some more kudos for Wilderness Trail. Like to see that. And I do agree that Alan Bishop is potentially a mad scientist. And this will be my last question. How should we choose bourbons for blind tastings? That comes from Jason Martini. That's a great question. I think that you've you really can't try to rationalize blind tastings. When you try, it just doesn't work. So I'd say just throw it all in there and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to put in like something that you would never necessarily like in a blind tasting. Like I've known this is what I do a lot. Peerless is one of these brands that people love to hate on because of their pricing. Now they came out of the gate as a young distiller charging $99 for their rye whiskey. Nice bottle, great people, and everyone just kind of shit on their whiskey. But I happen to really like it, and I found out I liked it through blind tastings. When you peel away the price points and the labels and you just taste the whiskey and you judge the whiskey for the whiskey, what you do is you take away all of your biases. And I have a lot of really good friends who are adamantly opposed to Peerless. And so I said, all right, let me take you through a blind tasting of Peerless up against the big rise. And almost every time, Peerless is in their top 3 out of like a flight of 10, and it blows their mind every time. And so I would say, the only thing I would tell you to do when you're doing your blind tastings is to have at least 10 and to always spit. If you're drinking through the whole course, you can taste and swallow a little bit, but you definitely want to spit. Otherwise, you become intoxicated and you can't really pull off a decent tasting. But 10 is a good number because you can go back and forth and compare. That's also a really good way to train your palate. And when you are tasting multiple whiskeys multiple times, you're starting to train yourself, and you find out how you like to taste and where you like to put it on your palate. Everybody's different. I taste differently than others do. Um, there was one whiskey reviewer. Well, I'm not going to get into that. Never mind. But anyway, please do your blind tastings. Tell me about them. It's a lot of fun, and you can learn a lot about yourself and whiskey. So, thank you all so much for joining me in this random live stream. And I will see more of you later. Keep your eye out for some dates on my Everyday American Whiskey of the Year, Best Rye, Best Craft, and Best American Whiskey of the Year. Cheers.